Go ahead and get started. I want to welcome, my name is Jim Hopper. I'm the Executive Director of the Bainbridge Community Foundation. I want to welcome you all to tonight's presentation, which is called Navigating a New World, with Jeff Leinaweaver and Paul Merriman. To start things off, we'd like to do the land acknowledgement. As Chief Seattle said, every part of the soil is sacred in the estimation of my people. Every hillside, every valley, every plain, and every grove has been hallowed by some sad or happy event in days long vanished. So we begin tonight acknowledging that the land that we're gathering on is within Aboriginal territory of the Suquamish people, the people of the clear salt water. Expert fishermen, canoe builders, basket weavers, the Suquamish live in harmony with the lands and waterways along Washington's Central Salish Sea as they have for thousands of years. Here, they protect the land and waters of their ancestors as they have laid out in the Point Elliott Treaty of 1855. So I want to welcome you all here. It's great to have you, and want to welcome you to the first of the Bainbridge Community Foundation events if you haven't been to them before. So we're going to start things out today with Jeff's presentation, but first we're going to do a poll just to get a sense of kind of who's in the audience. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that poll now. And we'd love for you to just tell us a little bit about who you are. And do note that the poll might be a little bit long, so you may have a little scroll bar on the right-hand side, so you can answer those questions there. Maybe just a few minutes for that. We're seeing a lot of parents joining in. That's great. All right, so I'm going to go ahead. It looks like we've heard from a critical mass of folks and share those results. All right, so you should all be able to see that. It looks like we have about 64% of you are parents, about 4% of you are students. Primary reason for attending today is both learning a little bit about the impact of COVID on education and the importance of saving and investing. You've come to the right place for that. And thanks for telling us where you heard about this presentation as well. So I want to start today by introducing Jeff. So Jeff is an incredible storyteller and an asset to Bainbridge Island. I'm going to have him do a little bit more introduction to himself, but he's a storyteller as well as somebody who believes deeply in the fact that people should be connected with the careers that mean the most to them and where they can be most successful. And so he'll be talking a little bit today about the reality of the world today and tools and tips for moving things forward. So with that, Jeff, welcome.
Great, thank you so much. Here, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, get things started. Now, if you all are wondering, I was saying that I have a doppelganger, and that doppelganger is I have to present tonight on two computers, or I'm speaking from one thing and presenting from another. The joys of modern life. But again, thank you so much for inviting me to come and speak with you all today. Just to say a little bit more about myself. So first of all, I always say that I was reincarnated as Jeff Leinaweaver. The reality is I was orphaned in Colombia during the Civil War in Latin America, and was able to kind of be reincarnated as Jeff Leinaweaver through parents who were teachers at a university in Colombia at the time. And I am here today because of so many 1,000 unseen helping hands. And I think this has really kind of sparked my interest in stories and the importance of story, but also the importance of what it means to own your story and and how we sit in this tension of kind of story, kind of authoring yourself or being authored by others. And true to this, I believe that the choices that we are making these days as it comes to career and how we kind of develop who we are and how we live our kind of the mythic journey of self, sit in this tension of kind of storing self versus being storied by others. And these dynamics are playing true nowadays with COVID, even more so. There's a quote about the duty of privilege is absolute integrity. And so I'm here with you for that reason. You know a little bit about my story, and I recognize I won the lottery. You know, my life may have been a whole other story, but it is not. And so I'm deeply grateful for the experiences I've had in my life and why I'm here and why I'm working on a project called Find Mino that I'll speak to in a little bit. But I've grown up. I actually, turns out that I had a lot of musical and theatrical talent. I used to play violin professionally. I've been on voiceovers and acting. My parents were actors. And I may have gone the route that maybe some of you who are thinking about going on the route in the arts think, oh my God, how is he going to get a job? But these things turn out. And so I have lived a really interesting life in that regards. And so I'm here to talk a little bit about that and taking chances, and also how you kind of build and develop a sense of self amidst the time of COVID and great change. Currently, I work at the University of Washington. I'm their senior organizational consultant and coach. I work with the president and the deans and others around executive coaching, organizational development, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I also have the startup named Find Mino. I have been on faculty at the University of Washington, teaching undergraduates at the Jackson School of International Studies. I've been a graduate faculty member of the Bainbridge Graduate Institute, a social innovation fellow, looking at sustainability. I've run the permaculture program at Antioch. So I've seen these programs of kind of adult education, master's, MBA level, and also undergraduates, as well as teaching and consulting. So I kind of straddle these worlds of scholar and practitioner. But the wonderful thing about this is, and particularly with the undergraduates, I see these kids who are going to make great change, and they are my favorite group, the undergraduates, because they really, of that age group, they have just transitioned from high school, and they're now in a place where they both want to be idealistic, change the world, want some practicality, but really are driven by that kind of seedling inside them that says, I can be something, and I know there's something, and my destiny is important, and I'm going to figure that out. So in that regards, I started a company a number of years ago, and we've been doing a lot of research. We've interviewed over 350 students here on Bainbridge Island. We've worked with the Foster School of Business and a number of other programs at UW, interviewing youth, young adults in high school, undergraduate, and graduate about what's worked for them about choosing college and careers. What does it mean to develop a career? What's working or what's not working? And unanimously, everyone says that the current system does not work, that the tools that they've been given to explore a career, to understand what it means to have a career, aren't working. And there's a lot of ennui, so to speak, about how we move forward. And so I have the startup that really we started, my partner who's in Amsterdam, we both met at Amazon early on. And I would say that one reason why I'm mentioning the Amazon connection is just, sometimes you have to take a risk when you develop a career. And in my case, when I joined Amazon, it was a very small company of 800 people. And I wrote Jeff Bezos a letter typed on my parents' typewriter. I had been coming back from Japan. I was a foreign correspondent for the Associated Press. And I wanted to try something new. And I said, hi, Jeff, I'm Jeff. And I explained my story to him. And the next thing you know, he brought me in, and I got this job doing international human resources, particularly focused on Japan and other international areas. And so That's how I met my partner, Hiranya, who is in Amsterdam. But what we have bonded on is that we both came from backgrounds that were very different, but we've both found our way into human resources, organizational development, leadership development, and a lot of cross-cultural international work. And we said, wow, our career took such interesting turns. Nothing was ever predicted this way. There was no kind of linear path here. But we both feel deeply about giving back. And so we've created this social venture to try to give back and help people make better choices so they live happier lives and they find meaning, which is what Find Mino is all about. At the end of the day, people want meaning, and our jobs, our careers, who we become, it's all about meaning. So we kind of have a play with Find Mino, but also Finding Nemo in terms of just kind of your own personal archetypal journey. But it's just setting the scene here that, I believe strongly about disrupting the status quo of college and career planning because it's not working. We're going to talk a little bit about this because COVID has accelerated everything. So we'll talk about this and how this impacts the future of work, things you should consider, and some resources for you in the future. But first, I'd like to tell you a quick story. So, as it has been and has been for millennia, there have been leaders all around the world, in this case, a king and a long forgotten kingdom, who spent his days trying to manage a great land, to make people happy, to do the right thing. And as great kings have, they have a great group of advisors who are very opinionated and tell the king what to do and how they should do it and what's better for everyone, because the king needs counsel. But oftentimes that counsel is so loud that the king can't listen to himself. And as it would happen, this king had a page who he's known since the page was a little boy. And the boy would follow with him for years. And he started getting older and older, and he started giving the king great advice with great wisdom for someone of such a young age. And so one day, the king decided to see what would happen if he challenged all the great advisors that all seemed to know so much and telling him what to do and what not to do. And so in the great floor, or in the great hall, on the great marble floor, he drew a line in a charcoal line, and he drew a long line in front of all of his advisors. And he said, if you all want to continue to be my advisor, you will make this line that I just drew on the floor, that you will make it shorter without even touching it. And they all kind of looked at each other and they looked around. And before you know it, they had a lot of arguing and a lot of, well, I'm more right than you are. But actually, nobody ever really came to give a right answer. They just spent more time arguing about who was more right about their posturing, about what they thought they should do, and what they thought the king would think about how they were doing. And then the page showed up, walked up to the line, grabbed the charcoal marker, and then next to the line drew a much longer line, and indeed so long that it made the original line shorter without even touching it. And so it was. He provided the answer to this riddle, and people could not believe it. But herein lies kind of a story within stories within stories. One story is, what happens when we hear too many things from other people and we don't listen to ourselves? The other story is, what if we only see wisdom coming from one direction? And another story in this is, how do we learn from ways in which we never saw coming? We're completely surprised by. So it's kind of learning to relearn and unlearning. And so I'd like to kind of build on that, this idea of learning to unlearn to relearn. So much of life is built around this concept of learn to unlearn to relearn. And I think more than any time, we need to consider this now as we move forward into the workforce of the future, as we develop careers, as we think about what things we've done that we may or may not have done that we'd like to do, but we'd like to do it again. But this is key. I always say that right now in human history, with the organizations that we're creating in this globalized world, with all this technology, we've never done this before as a species. We've never done this. And now we have a pandemic. And so even more, I think embracing this idea of constant learning, by learning to unlearn, to relearn, is a really different approach than I screwed up, I made a mistake, I feel bad, I'm afraid to be seen caught learning. But yet this plagues people. In my work in organizations with adults, one of the biggest issues that I find all the time are the imposter syndrome, and that people are afraid to be seen caught learning. And yet it is at the core of what we need to be as people and as organizations, which are learning organizations that we're constantly on a stage of becoming. So I throw this out as a provocation for you to think and consider as we move forward in this conversation today. But I know that you're here to talk a little bit about, in the era of COVID, what do we do? How do we prepare for the jobs of tomorrow? How do we sense the future to compete in the present? And how do you become career ready for this future? And how does this impact young adults in transition? They're big questions, and there may not always be quick answers, but these questions are the types of questions that you must sit with, that you travel with. They're always informing how you learn and grow every day. But one thing that I can say is that things have changed, and I have seen a great disconnect and a divide between an older population that is working with Zoom and looking at technology in a new way, and the youth that have been doing Minecraft and other types of games and social connection during the COVID, that I genuinely believe that in around the next 10 years that the technology is going to flip, and that this youth group between like the ages of high school through undergraduate are going to completely change the world based on how they've connected and create meaning, how they found meaning in this time. So one of the things that I say is to this group, you are the change makers, that all this change will come from the youth at this age level. And I'm really excited for it, but we have to be prepared for what that means and to empower everyone to move forward with this together. So we talk about the future workforce. You might have heard of millennials. Now we have zillennials, but Gen Z. But Gen Z is a really interesting group and a generation, and they've seen a lot. And they will not sit back for not, you know, they want social change. They want diversity, and there is a different ethos in this generation. And I say we need to embrace that and really think about what that means in terms of how they're going to shake things up, how COVID has impacted them, but how they will then pivot and work with the rest of us as we deal with a crazy future. You know, oftentimes we talk about high school and then we talk about college and or somebody transitioning from post-high school into maybe going into the military or doing a trade. But the reality is that these age groups, that there is a kind of young adults in transition, and they're transitioning from 16, 17, 18, all the way up to 23, 24, 25. And that this is a continuum of growth. And while we believe the old stories that sometimes are kind of keeping us from really seeing a truth, and that is that there is a great need to help young adults transition, find meaning, find a sense of self, and find a sense of agency or efficacy, meaning being able to really do what you need to do an adult. But this is developing something that's called the quarter life crisis. And the quarter life crisis defines this kind of continuum of young adults who are really struggling. And COVID has made these young adults feel even more isolated, in part because they're afraid to say they're caught learning. They're afraid or don't know how to negotiate the world, even if it's negotiating a sense of independence, dealing with finances, to dealing with school, dealing with all the ways in which we adult, it's different. And the next thing is developing relationship intelligence. Well, I know people have called it networking in the past. The importance of developing relationship intelligence takes time and takes understanding, and it takes more than the weak link relationships we often see in social media, but really understanding how to connect with generations, with individuals in IRL, in real life. And so these are real challenges for the current generation. And so this is a big area of support, but also it's going to impact how we do our work and how people succeed. So in talking about, kind of challenging the status quo and looking at young adults in transition and all of the high stakes decision making that the young adults are asked to make, particularly financially, but also in the ways in which people feel that tension between authoring themselves versus authoring or being authored by others. But let's quickly just ask ourselves, why do we go to school? Does it really matter? Is there a return on investment? How is this showing up? Education, because of COVID, is changing rapidly. And there is a question that is today's bachelor's degree, as one example, kind of the old gas guzzler of the past. And we're going to have new educational offerings in the future that are guilds or maybe bundles of certificate programs, or there are programs like programs that offer like specific training, like coding schools, and so the question is, asking these questions and thinking critically about why you go to school is important. And a lot of people feel ashamed to talk about it because they feel like everyone else has it going on. But this is so important. And I think, similar to what Paul would talk about, what are we investing our time in? Are we just going along with things? But how are we going to use this now? How are we going to use this future? How are we going to develop ourselves? And really understanding some of these differences between knowledge and wisdom and skills. What does this mean? And what will this mean 10 years from now if I go to school and get this degree? What if I get a trade instead? Can I still go back to school? So more questions, but they're questions that are scary questions to ask. And like I said, there's a lot of tension out there for doing it right, for keeping up with the Joneses, for all of these other things. But we want to make it normal. We need to be able to challenge some of these things, because at the end of the day, what I've seen as a faculty member, as an example, are adults at an MBA program going back to school to say something in social responsibility, who feel genuinely traumatized by the industrial education complex because they did what they were supposed to do, but it didn't fill their soul and they didn't feel like they could do anything. So asking this earlier and helping people make these choices now, the right choices that both balances head and heart, are incredibly important. So as I speak to this, let's talk about a quarter life crisis. So we got a problem. I mean, in the workplace, number one, 50% of us aren't engaged. We have high dropout rates. About 50 to 70% of students choose the wrong majors. And then we have student loan debts that record, $1.6 trillion. This is a huge issue. And if you're afraid to say, I don't know, or you're afraid to get caught up in this, that sense of kind of obligation or fear is not helping the problem. And in fact, it's exacerbating the quarter life crisis, in which it's a true crisis of identity. If you're in that age and you're saying, I don't know what to do, I have all this money, I want to feel like I need to do. So we need to slow it down. We're all there together, right? This is a part of this, and we are inventing our way out of every day with a whole new world ahead of us, and we can do it together. And part of that is really recognizing that career skills and learning is in flux. The jobs that will be around in 2030 may not even be created now. I started doing work in sustainability, corporate social responsibility, and organizational work before there were even a degree. And then I started teaching at Bainbridge Graduate Institute, the very first program on the planet to have a green MBA program. And of course, and so these things happen over time, and sometimes you have jobs before they're actually a job. So we need to be aware of, how do we sense the future to compete in the present is a really important question. And tuning in to your sense of intuition, but also your smarts, is really important. But recognizing nobody knows what's next. And what I think is really important for young adults who are in this quarter life crisis, I think parents and adults having a true career conversation with their young adults in their lives about how we are all having to recreate ourselves and skill and upskill and reskill for life is an important thing. And I think that normalizes this idea of that we're always growing and that we're growing together, and having a career conversation is a greater family conversation. Because, you know, I know many adults who they don't want their kids to see them sweat, but they are also doing the same thing. So let's have a conversation about it. It can really make people happy in terms of normalizing conversations that are tough. And sometimes just naming things that make you scared makes them not be so scary anymore. So the reality is the future of work will be really different. So why are we still preparing young people for yesterday's world? I mean, this is what we consistently see. People are showing up in programs and they want something different. The world is suddenly different. COVID's changed everything. You know, one of the interesting things I've heard a lot at the University of Washington lately is, oh, wow, now we have to sell a whole new value proposition as to, well, why does it matter? What's the value of being at an on-site location? Like what's the difference when the University of Washington knows, like as an undergraduate program, anybody could go to another program online and do that or something different. So things are really changing. But more than anything, we believe, or I believe, the status quo is not an option. It's their old stories driving behaviors, and they are not allowing us to see the future. So, you know, and I say coming back to kind of positively disrupt the status quo of college and career planning, I mean it. The most important thing is we want to find our meaning, and that's key. So let's take a moment and look at the future of work, or just have a conversation of what that means. Now, in some degrees, I think we've talked a little bit about Gen Z being more, you know, aware of a great diverse population and wanting to have this in the workplace, and that's true. More and more, we have the emotional workplace. As an example, I am doing trainings right now talking about trauma and the trauma-induced leadership, where we are training leaders to understand that people have been traumatized by COVID and all the ways in which COVID has shown up, the uncertainty, the unpredictability, everything. And so we have a traumatized workforce, and more people are coming back to the workforce, are being asked to come back, and they don't want to with Delta. So there's a lot of emotional stuff in the workplace. And then when you look at something like diversity, equity, and inclusion, there are a lot of people who live with trauma all the time. I have colleagues who say it's traumatizing to be Black, and I have to bring that into the workplace, but I'm living with this level of trauma. So this is something that is going to continue to actually understand that we all show up together in the workplace, and we are there together, and we need to be able to hold an emotional space that's different than what was before, because it's not working. And it's certainly not working for the Gen Zs. The physical workplace is up in the air. What's the importance of offices? What's the importance of, you know, why do we need this in the future? But then that moves into the technological workspace. And one thing that we've seen a lot, and I would say watch this as a trend, is the new immersive workplace. And this is where young adults, high school, undergraduate, I think are going to flip the whole system. Virtual reality office space is a real thing. This immersive workplace, if you look at it out there, there's, as an example, something called spatial. You can do whiteboarding, you can do presentations. There are going to be so many new spaces of technology where the physical workplace and the technological workspace are going to blend together. But we're going to have all of this connectedness that's different. And then back to the purposeful workplace, you know, we all want meaning. And so how are we sharing that together? So these are trends that are certainly driving what's going on in the workplace, but also in how people are choosing college degrees or choosing jobs that they want. But oftentimes it's kind of, you know, people are just guessing at what they want, and they, you know, and I think that's really important to understand that sometimes you just don't know if the job hasn't even been created yet. So this is a great comment from Blair Shepard at PricewaterhouseCoopers, and to kind of respond to the question, are you ready? Are you ready for the future of work? So, you know, so what should we tell our children? That to stay ahead, you need to focus on your ability to continuously adapt. You need to engage with others in that process, and most importantly, retain your core sense of identity and values. But for students, it's not just about acquiring knowledge, but about how to learn. And so for the rest of us, we should remember that intellectual complacency is not our friend, and that learning, not just new things, but new ways of thinking, is a lifelong endeavor. And that is so true. And that, I think, is the core of where we're at in the world with COVID and how we are literally going to invent our way out of this. How are we going to do this? How are we going to learn? And what's the role of technology like AI? How is that going to impact us? So when we look at the forces shaping the workforce for the workplace of the future of 2030, as an example, PricewaterhouseCoopers, KPMG, and a number of other big firms have done a lot of pooling out there. And the reality is people want to learn. They know they need to retrain themselves. And there is a big fear that automation is going to be putting a lot of people out of their jobs. People believe there's kind of different levels of technological intelligence, like assisted intelligence, augmented and artificial intelligence, and that will influence the workforce of the future. And if maybe there's another way to think of that is when you have your iPhone and it's always kind of doing spell check for you, or all the things that are trying to do work for you and kind of trying to solve that problem for you, that's a type of assisted and augmented intelligence. And we're going to have that more and more, where things are kind of finishing our sentences for us, meaning to be helpful, but it's taking away certain things that we do. Another big trend shaping the workforce of the future is freelancing. Freelancing is going to be more the norm. It is more likely that people going to school now, getting a degree or a trade, will have to be doing it on their own for a while. And you're going to have to rethink and reskill and upskill and constantly learn how to reinvent yourself. And so upskilling or reskilling are key to constantly developing yourself, and organizations developing their workforce and staying ahead of the curve. And so again, when you come back to this question of college and education and what do you do? Well, first of all, I think it's important to say you're going to have to continue to do it, and that the degree isn't the end. And so ask yourself, why are you doing this? And what are you focusing on? And how might you add to this? But it's also asking yourself, how can I use what I have to, I become kind of the Swiss Army knife, where I have everything within me and I'm able to reinvent myself wherever I go, regardless of megatrends. I mean, COVID is one megatrend, but climate change is a huge megatrend that could impact us every day. And I think if, you know, I spent years doing sustainability work and obviously working at Bainbridge Graduate Institute, and we all kept kind of waving our hands and saying, but we have this big issue showing up. We all need to, like, you know, why is climate change the biggest issue of our time? And it didn't always get the news. But the pandemic has hit, and I think more than anything, we have all shared in an experience that globally we can say sometimes the hubris of humanity is forgetting that there are things bigger than us, and that the systems and the technologies that we're creating are also bigger than us. And so it's an important time to kind of lean into that, have conversations together, and know how you can upskill and reskill together as you think about the future. So with that, I just wanted to kind of throw out some questions for you to consider. It's kind of a different way of thinking about career choices and how that might shape both your own choice in your own career, but the future of the workforce. So as an example, and if you can put this in the chat, we can look at this, but if anything, think of this as, these are just kind of provocations for your thinking. But one is thinking about your career, what is most important to you, job security and long-term service, doing a job that makes a difference, to be in control of my work, what I do and when I do it, and taking every opportunity to maximize my income. These questions may be different for the same person at different stages in one's life, but all of these questions start making and kind of chiseling out new social worlds, new job opportunities, and new ways in which you want to craft your career. The next thing, your ideal career path, staying long-term with an organization which has earned my loyalty and respect, having a mutually beneficial relationship with an organization where I can experience a variety of roles, working a lot of projects with a fast-moving organization and startups, or doing what's right for me, even if I could earn more money elsewhere. I mean, again, understanding your values of who you are and what you are creating as a designer of your own career, designer of your life, these questions probably will make more of an impact on what you do than even the degree. Because sometimes, people have English degrees, but they still get a great job and they might have these choices. Just a few more just to consider. What do you want to gain from your working life? You want something tangible? Do you want to innovate and create? You want a prestigious role? Or do you want pride in working for an organization with a strong organizational purpose, right? And this, what's the role of identity and the identity we seek to project and the identity of what we want to become? Some people are only driven by the prestigious role. Some people only want to innovate and create. And so these questions are really important to ask, particularly if you're thinking about an undergraduate degree, but think about this at the end. What do you want with it? How do you want to do this? And last, it's just some types of, when you accept an employment for the future, sometimes there are conditions that go with that. So do you work for an organization that pays fairly and puts humans and the planet first, but delivering on that means the border between work and life are fluid, which means you might have a 24/7 day where technology is always going back and forth and you don't have much balance, but maybe that's what you want. Being a part of a startup, it's quick and nimble, you create many things, but doesn't have any permanent employment or benefits, just a chance to share the rewards of success, but you could get your employment. Gaining higher rewards, an organization that analyzes your performance at every step and incentivizes you to enhance your performance via cutting edge technology and drugs. And yes, this is true. More and more companies, as they have kind of big pharma and big tech to looking at healthcare costs. If you have a Fitbit or other things, they're starting to look at these things as a way to kind of monitor you and whether or not you're doing the right things for you and whether or not you need to take supplements or whatnot to be the best of you. But this is something that is trending for 10 years from now. Or do you want to work for an employer with a good brand, but you need to live the values of organization 24/7 with pledges around your carbon footprint and life choices, et cetera, et cetera. So the organizations of the future will demand new things for us. Our ability to be freelancers will demand different things for us, and how we want to make our money as well as make our meaning will be important. And these issues are more core to who you are, and are important to think about as you consider, as an example, a trade or a degree program. Really thinking about that, having a conversation at home and with friends. You never know what's going to show up, and recognize that this may change over time. The more you explore different careers, career opportunities, the more you think, maybe I don't want to do that, or maybe I do want to do that. I didn't realize I wanted to do that. So we've answered all those questions. So what does that mean? So if we think of everyone and the sum of these types of questions are making these types of choices when they take degrees, when they look at jobs. So what are the 4 worlds of work anticipated to be around in 2030? And they are kind of 4 worlds. We have a red, yellow, blue, and green. So the red world will be where innovation rules, where you will find individualism, where you will find incubators, where people in organizations are always going to be doing this fast-paced platforms, startups. So that is one option of where we're going. Ask yourself, would you want to be in the red world? Does this excite you? If so, maybe there are clues in this to what types of programs and things you should study. Maybe you're bringing in studying entrepreneurship and engineering might be an interesting combination. It's just one example. The blue world, corporate is king. This is a continued theme from now, where big company capitalism rules as organizations to grow bigger, and individual preferences trump beliefs about social responsibility. I mean, certainly this is true with organizations like Amazon, which I still can't believe I was employee 800 when I joined, and now it's this mega company, and but we have companies now that are bigger and more powerful than countries. And again, we've never done this before as a species. So we're all learning together. We have to do this. But So what's the impact of the blue world? Do you want to play in that world? Is this something that's exciting to you? That's great. How can you leverage what you're doing now to kind of get you there? And if you have this kind of as an end goal in mind, that's wonderful. Then we have the yellow world, where humans come first, where people look at social justice and community-based businesses, crowdfunding capital, networker guilds, artisans, ethical brands. I mean, this is a whole other area of what's coming out of the world, and that is the values to put humans first and social justice, diversity, equity, inclusion. Well, this is going to drive these types of businesses and outcomes. And so, again, the questions that we asked just a few slides ago are going to end up creating these types of social worlds. Lastly, the green world, where companies care, social responsibility and trust. Again, this is very similar to the yellow world. But the green world is characterized by a strong social conscience, a sense of environmentalism, and trust is the basic currency underpinning this world that we're creating. But when it comes to these questions, one of the things I always ask my clients, when I have a diverse group of people in an organization, is the question is, what are we making together? Let's not look at the parts, but what are we making together? But if we step back and as a society ask, what are we making together? What are we making together when we are putting through kids through tough and rigorous testing to get into programs in which they're not really sure they want to do that? What are we making? Are these old stories? What are these new stories? But it's an interesting question to kind of reorient ourselves. I see this, all these worlds are totally based in private industry. As someone who has spent most of their life in academia and government, I'm not seeing recognition of the massive worlds of education and public service. I think that's more probably in the yellow worlds, but I agree with you. And again, this is just a scenario of just the different types of worlds that are created. And again, there are actually a lot of trends showing that a lot of big higher ed will have to reinvent itself to be more like private industry. So we will see. But again, thanks, Deb, for your comments. These are just provocations of the future. They're just provocations for the future. And genuinely, I work at the University of Washington. It is an amazing institution. We are also proud. And it's really struggling to adapt. And that's a big part of where we are. It's adapt or die. You also have Western Governors University as a counter to that has adapted, and they have a model that's economical, and people are able to fit it in with working. And it's making big institutions very scared. And I would also say, as the former management faculty of the Bainbridge Graduate Institute that went into the Presidio and Pinchot and these kind of various incarnations, it was really, sobering when the very first program on the planet, the MBA program, to start a green MBA program that was then copied by everyone else on the planet, went out of business because of the models. So, I think there is kind of an inherent entrepreneurial aspect to what we're doing and how we're becoming and who we are becoming together. It's not about being alone. This relationship intelligence is so important. It's about how we learn and live together and how we develop that relationship intelligence as we grow. So with that, let's talk a little bit about the skills behind all of this. Skills. There's so many different ways to look at this: experience, training, ability, growth, advanced training, knowledge, competence, learning. Boy, there are a lot of distinctions. And oftentimes we don't sit back and ask ourselves what these distinctions are. And when I was asking earlier, why go to school when you could just train for something? Why not get a trade? What if people say, I can learn that on my own? Why do I need this? What's the difference between knowledge and wisdom? These things are really important. And they pencil out in different ways in the types of jobs you do and in the types of meaning that you make in the jobs you do, and in the ways in which you develop relationships and a sense of self and personal leadership. So coming back to learn, unlearn, relearn, learn, unlearn, relearn, that's a tongue twister. Reskilling is for relevance, and upskilling is the future of education. So just know that when you get a degree now, you're going to be adding things along the way. The trends are that we might do more and more things that are guilds, which is a collection of things. They see this happening a lot in European education, actually, where you can put, it's almost like taking like 3 different certificate programs of 3 different things that have practical application and bundling it for 1 degree, versus getting a traditional degree program that might say you need to do English and then learn, take a whole semester of Chaucer or something like that. But the point is that no matter what you study, you're going to have to continue to study, and you're going to develop your own story of who are you becoming as a learner and how you're upskilling. And so, there's a little bit of Finding Nemo where it's like, keep on swimming, keep on swimming. We have to keep on swimming, and we're going to do it. And we can do it together. And developing a growth mindset, learning from your relationships is so important. So when I think of a growth mindset, and on our platform, Find Mino, we are rolling out some courses based on the growth mindset. The growth mindset is really helping people understand that we sometimes have negative self-talk that keep us from learning and growing. And it's a fixed mindset. It's a habit of kind of like closing things down. But a growth mindset is a yes and to how we keep moving, the habit of learning, the habit of being kind of infectiously curious, how you develop yourself. And these are some really important competencies of what it means to become a human-centered designer. And by human-centered, I mean like focusing on you and others, having, a sense of empathy for others, understanding that someone may not be like you, but you can learn from them, that you listen to them, learning how to embrace ambiguity, to stay positive with this, to learn from failure, to recognize that there are so many things that are design fails along the way to create something that really works. And that iterating is not failing, it's learning. And ultimately, creating this sense of growth mindset of who you are as a human-centered designer of you in your own life, this creative confidence can help you pick yourself up and keep on going and know where you're going. And have that sense that I can do it, I really can do it, and I can make a difference. And so with that, I think that, to develop a growth mindset and accelerate your future career, I want to leave with these kind of 3 aspects of how to do that. And that is, 1, develop humility. Learn to say you don't know. Learn to be caught learning. Like I said, this is one of the biggest issues I see with adults in organizations all the time. They're terrified that people are going to see that they don't know. But it's okay. We don't know. We're all learning together. And with COVID and the ways in which COVID and shifting to hybrid technologies, working from home, all the ways we're disconnected, none of us know, but we have to know and share it together. It's a part of that sense making. We need to develop active and empathetic listening skills. So listen to other people's story. Don't make it about a monologue about you. Ask why, even in your mind, why might that person be saying that? Why would they say it this way? Why would they do that? Why can I learn, why can really help us understand that sometimes truths are buried for people. Sometimes we can learn a lot from someone. And in doing that, we can also learn about our own personal biases that keep us from really understanding one another and understanding new solutions and new ways forward. I think that's one aspect of that old story, where you had the young person that no one thought had any wisdom. And he just showed up and he got out of his comfort zone and stood up in front of all these people and came up with a different answer. But oftentimes you have to do it. You have to take that risk, ask, make yourself uncomfortable. Like I said, I wrote Jeff Bezos a letter on a typewriter, and I just said, hey, Jeff, this is Jeff. This is me. And I shared my personal story. And it made a difference. And I'm glad I did that. So, you know, you have to be bold too, along with all these things. So, find Mino, you know, it's here on the island. We have these programs with Rotary, BYS, Bainbridge Community Foundation, and hopefully you'll see more of us around as we develop the program. But we did want to just let you know that we have some courses that we're putting out there and have some discounts if you're interested. We're also offering a free 30-minute career coaching conversation with mention of Bainbridge Community Foundation at these links, and we can send these out later. But we'd be happy to set up a 30-minute career conversation with anyone, and really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all. And I know we're going to be talking a little bit more. And I wanted to say thank you to BCF for inviting me to speak.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Really terrific content. And yeah, if you just throw Jeff Bezos's address in the chat, I'm sure everyone appreciate that, so they can just message directly. Jeff will be back for more conversation, Q&A here in just a moment. But now I want to introduce Paul Merriman. So Paul Merriman is a member of our board. I will let Paul go into a more extensive invitation, but I'll tell you that I've been working with Paul for a number of years now, and his commitment to helping people understand how to get the tools to be financially literate is second to none. And it's terrific. I mean, his messages, even if you think that you're not quite ready to hear them, because you may not be thinking about retirement right now, I'll tell you they are very, very important. To that end, I'd love for you all to participate in a quick poll. I didn't realize I was still sharing that. Quick poll to just kind of set the baseline of where we are, so that Paul can get a sense of who's here in the audience. So if you guys can click on that polls button, you should be able to see the active poll.
That's too long a test for me, Jim.
I know. We want to make sure we get as much response as we can get.
I know.
A little bit of a delay there. There we go. Thank you all for doing that. Excellent. So I'm going to go ahead and share these results. I want to thank you all for taking the time to do that. So, so Paul, you've got an audience that believes that we should start saving for retirement right now. That the majority of them think about 10% of what you make saving to retirement is the rule of thumb. That stocks are some of the best ways to save for retirement. No one thought cryptocurrency was, so you'll be pleased to hear that. And 65% of them believe that they'll be responsible for their cost of their professional credentials, where 57% will have assistance from their parents and family. And does retirement affect their career choice? 52% said yes. And most of them are planning on retiring either by 65 or potentially never. 78% of them know how to prepare a budget. And the goals of saving for 87% of them are retirement, followed by owning a home, and then education. So with that, Paul, I'll turn it over to you for your presentation. Thanks.
Thank you, Jim. And Jeff, I really appreciated your presentation. It was intimidating, but I think it's wonderful information. I would be ecstatic. I would be ecstatic with those results, Jim, if I had not seen the breakdown of the folks that are here with us tonight. And as I recall, there was one person who was willing to admit that they were in school. The rest appeared to be parents and other. Now, I may have misunderstood that poll, but that idea that they think that many people think you should start investing now sounds like older people rather than younger people, because older people are the ones who can constantly say, I wish I had started saving sooner. So we'll find out hopefully how many high school students we actually have with us. So I really was taken back by Jeff's presentation, and I was taken back personally because it made me feel very, very old. And I got where I am in my life. I've been retired since 2012, and I started a foundation, financial education foundation, when I retired. It took about 6 hours before I was back working. And I've come from the old school about almost everything that I do. Tonight, I actually have a few graphics in my presentation, which those of you who know my work will find, we'll be asking what is going on with Paul, what's happened in his life. But I'm learning, and I want to navigate the new world too. But tonight I wanted to speak about these high school kids, young people coming out into a world that is filled with forces and trends that are really very troubling for me in terms of thinking about the financial future. I'm sitting around worried about your teenage children when they're 60 years old. I mean, it seems like it might be a waste of time, but it's still what my life is partly devoted to. And when I think about people creating an income from freelancing, and I know some will be very successful doing that. Others, I think it will be a struggle, maybe not a struggle to survive, but a struggle to save for later. And with the struggle of the lack of pensions, we're down to 13% of folks now have a pension. 25 years ago, it was, I think, 28%. And I believe it was close to 50 when I started with my first job. So there are trends that suggest some real challenges for people around the saving for the future. The 401k experiment, as some people have called, a complete failure. And the failure is because people haven't saved as they should have. People haven't known how to invest as they should have. And I don't see anything that makes me believe it's changing in the sense of what people believe in. I will come to some point in my presentation tonight where I'll come into a fork in the road, stocks versus bonds. And only a third of millennials have stocks in their retirement portfolio, a third. And these people don't know it, but the baby boomers are expecting their children to help support them because they don't have enough money. I mean, this is what the surveys show. About 24% of baby boomers are looking to their children to be able to fill the difference between what they have and what they need to retire. So, and on the, at the same time, as I want people to know all of this stuff, what I'm trying to get them to know is what has worked for 90 years And here Jeff is talking about trends that are changing here all the time, within a 5 or 10 year period. I'm trying to get people to look to the past, benefit from that past, and do the things that made investing work in the past. And what do we find? We find that young people think that cryptocurrencies are less risky than the S&P 500. I mean, that is a problem. Well, it's a problem for me because I'm in the old world, but let's see if I can move into the new world here, and hope that there'll be something here that will be helpful to you and your family. I have 3 simple goals. I want to focus on just a handful of investment decisions that are life changers. And I hope that those few things will encourage the folks who, especially the young folks who are attending, to learn more, to dig deeper. If the possibilities are this huge, by making some very simple, easy decisions, what might it be worth if I learned more? And I want to finish my presentation by showing you an amazingly simple step that you can take to get the ball rolling and have it be a meaningful step that will look like it's nothing. Trust me. I want you to learn more because through this book, this brand new book, well, it came out in November, December, but it's entitled We're Talking Millions. It is free. You can there's a place you can click to download here, and let me just bear with me for a sec here. Whoops, go back one. You can download this, a PDF copy of this, and it's about $12 million decisions. And you're going to make them by design or by default. You're going to hopefully take the right path rather than the path that leads you to the lower returns. But my job with that book and with my time here tonight and most of the work that I do will be to hopefully get you to read. That's a 3-hour read, by the way. We're joined here by somebody who's even older than I am. And some of his quotes are the best in the saving and investing community. The one thing he says about success, and this isn't just with investing, but success overall is you only have to do a very few things right in your life, so long as you don't do too many things wrong. And my work, our work at the foundation, is to carefully show you what we think the right things are. And we spend some time telling you what the wrong things are because we're just afraid there are people who want to make a lot of money off of you by you doing the wrong thing, that you'll take the wrong fork in the road. But Warren Buffett is right. I'll focus tonight on $5 million decisions. Now, one of those is actually a $5 million decision, by the way. And each of these decisions, when I say $1 million decision, I mean if you go one path versus the other, the right one will leave you over your lifetime an extra $1 million. Now you're going to say, are you suggesting that there's potentially $12 million in these 12 decisions? And the answer is absolutely yes. Now, obviously, you have to be willing to save. That's $1 million decision right there, whether you save or you spend. If you think about it, spending is what keeps most of us happy. And people know it. And well, I'll talk about those people in just a second. I want you to save early. I want you to pick stocks over bonds. I want you to do the things that give you the best tax haven that I've ever seen. And I want to introduce you to target date funds if you don't know what they are, because they too are $1 million decision. I often ask high school kids about the list of people who want you to save and invest. And after they think about it for a few minutes, it turns out it's probably mom and dad and grandma and grandpa. Then, of course, there is the list of people that want you to spend. And it turns out it's virtually everybody else. And the problem is that, on the one hand, I could say that investing has never been more efficient. It has never offered the opportunity to make as much money as it does today because of the efficiencies that were not built into the process when I came into the saving industry. On the other hand, as things have gotten more efficient as an investor, the people who want to part us of our money have learned how to be more efficient in figuring out how to get their hand in your pocket. And therein lies probably the biggest challenge. It isn't that you couldn't be a good saver, it's that these people are so good at getting you to be a good spender. And that has to stop, I think, if you're going to be a long-term successful investor. And again, Warren Buffett says it best: do not save what is left after spending, but spend what is left after saving. Pay yourself first. And that works. We know that works. We see it in every study where people are given an opportunity to automatically put money into a 401k. Even before they start working for the company, when they sign up, they're going to immediately start saving. Those people tend to save more than when you offer people, do you want to save or do you want to spend? If you leave them to their own devices, yeah, I'll take the spending. But if you cleverly make it automatic that they are a saver first, they do tend to go along with it. And my friend Paul Hayes, who has written a book entitled Spending Your Way to Wealth, he says we must be reminded that saving is spending, only for later. And you want to save sooner. I'm looking for $1 million case here, okay? Here's a real simple $1 million case. Eventually you get married, you have some children, you decide you're going to put away a little money for your kids for their retirement someday. They would love that. But you don't want to do it now when they're young. You want to wait. Maybe you'll help them when they get their first 401k plan. I'm not sure what you might do, but you could start saving for them when they're born. You could put away $1 a day, $365 a year. You could invest it until they start making money, where they could do a Roth IRA. You take the money out of the little pot that you've been building up at $365 a year, and you put it into the Roth IRA in stocks, into the S&P 500, for example, and that's an index that has compounded at 10% a year for 93 years. Not every year, but the compound rate of return has been that. So over that 65 years, and by the way, you hope that you will encourage your child to take over that job at age maybe 21 and let them start putting in the 365. But by age 65, with a 10% compound rate of return, that would be almost $1.8 million. On the other hand, if you wait until later, until the child is 10 and you start the program, it is $686,000. And if you do what most people would probably do, wait until they are 21 to help out, it turns out that $365 a year only grows to $238. I think there's $1 million in there by starting earlier, sooner. The magic, and this is the one thing in the book that seems to be different. This book, we're talking millions. It has had almost 100 written reviews at Amazon. All but 3 of those have been 5s. 3 of them that weren't 5s were 4s. And the fact is, there really isn't anything new in the book, at least the first half of the book. The second half has got some new material, but the first half really talks about all the lessons folks who are older here already know about: diversification, low expenses, all those things that we were taught along the way if you probably become a successful investor. What we did, though, was we made a simple point, and that was that if you could just add 0.5% to the return, that it is $1 million outcome. And 0.5% does not seem like a big deal. And it turns out there are lots of ways to make an extra 0.5%. There are 8 of them in the book, but the point is that if you can pick up that extra 0.5%, you might retire early, you might have more to spend, you will have more to spend in retirement, and you'll leave more to people you care about. Now, I love tables of numbers, but this is the only one I'm going to bore you with tonight. But the reason I like tables of numbers, I'm like Jeff, I love stories. And this table of numbers is a story. It tells me a story that has a bottom line. The bottom line is that by doing something very simple, you pick up $2.3 million more. And that $2.3 million more, I imagine, what could that be? More travel in retirement? Could it be helping children and grandchildren more than you might otherwise would have been able to? What life dream might one have with that extra $2.3 million? Because the assumption is one investor makes 8% a year. By the way, that is a rate of return that we can expect historically from investing in a target date fund that I'll talk about in a few minutes. I'm talking about between the early years when the market is, when you're all in stocks maybe, and then later in your life when you start adding bonds as you get closer to retirement. But the assumption is 8% is the compound rate of return. And that after retirement, you earn 6%. So you're accumulating here for many years. As a matter of fact, you're accumulating for 46 years at the 8%. Then you retire for 30 years, I believe, here at 6%. I better get my glasses on. And what does that lead you to if you make 8% during the accumulation and 6% then during the distribution period? Well, as it turns out, you've invested $230,000. At age 67, you have $2.3 million, and then as you took the money out, you were able to take out, this seems like a lot, $3.5 million here that you took out from age 67 to 97. And then at the end of your life, if you died at age 97, you left $3.8 million. So making 8%, then 6%, and taking out 4%. I don't think I mentioned that before. You have a total of $7.3 million for you and your heirs. Add 0.5%. I don't care where it comes from, simply add 0.5% and the story changes. Instead of having 2.3 million at retirement, you have 2.65. Instead of having a distribution of 3.5, the distribution is 4.5. Instead of what you leave to others being 3.8, it's 5.1. Okay? And the total is $9.6 million. And the numbers are all potentially realistic. We look at the history of investing, not by speculating, not by sitting in cash or in bonds, but by investing in a traditional kind of way that has worked wonderfully in the past. So do I think 0.5% is worth $1 million? Looks to me like it could be worth $2 million. And let me show you the home run. Just a spoiler alert here. This is the one that puts the most money on your bottom line after you make the decision to save. And yet, only 1/3 of millennials are willing to do this. And that is to select stocks over bonds as an investment for the long term, to select stability in bonds instead of putting your foot on the gas for growth with stocks. Stability, safety, security. This is what is driving a lot of young people to put all their money in fixed income securities, if they're saving at all, of course. But the bottom line is that that safety and security costs you over a long period of time. Because here you'll see that the compound rate of return since 1928 to 2020 was about 5% for government bonds, okay? That would have turned a $100 investment into $9,300. And that's before we apply inflation. On the other hand, in the S&P 500, the highest quality index in the US stock market, the compound rate of return was about 10, or it grew to 700,000. But that's not, I mean, that's a very long period of time. And young people say, well, I don't have 93 years, but I might be saving for 40 years. Well, then you might want to ask, what is the very worst 40-year period the S&P 500 has had since 1928? The worst 40-year return was an 8.9% compound rate of return. And the best was 12.5. And that's a huge difference in what you'll have to spend and leave to others, 8.9 to 12.5. But when you look at what bonds pay in the best and worst times, by the way, the bonds have had a 40-year period where they made 1.6%. So from my viewpoint, the risk is in the bonds. And if we're looking for a 0.5%, it looks to me like between 5 and 10 is that's 10 0.5%, which means this is a multi-million-dollar decision from everything we know about the past. And another huge decision, and this is particularly interesting for young people, because when you're young, you're not making a lot of money. And if you invest money in something for the long term, like in an IRA or a 401k, where you're going to put some money in and use it 40 years from now or more, that money can get into a tax-deferred or tax-free environment. So if you go into a tax-deferred IRA or a tax-deferred 401k, when you put your $100 to work, you get to write that $100 off of your income for tax purposes. But if you use the Roth IRA, you do not pay a penny in taxes for the 40 years. So that's the same as you would get from the regular IRA, is to defer taxes. But then comes the day, the moment of truth, when you start taking the money out of that IRA or out of that 401k. And those people who invested in the regular IRA, the regular 401k, are going to be hit with the tax. We have no idea what that tax will be, but you will be charged the tax at that point. On the other hand, the person who does the Roth IRA does not get to deduct the $100. So in essence, more money stays in the account. And in exchange for not getting that tax deduction, you get the tax-free distribution and eventually tax-free distribution to your children. One of the best estate planning tools that you can find. And so when you are young and you're not making much money, you're not at a high tax bracket, it's a slam dunk to do the Roth IRA, because it is the only way, or the Roth 401k, it is the only way that I know that you can live investment-wise for retirement, tax-free from age 18 or however old you are right now, and until you're 98. And oh, by the way, with a Roth IRA or the Roth 401k, you don't need to take money out like you have to if you have a regular IRA. You could leave it there and donate it all to your kids and your grandkids tax-free. By the way, I do not give tax advice. There are three investments that truly changed our industry for the investors, that made it possible for the smallest investor today to be treated as royally as the largest investor. And those three securities, those three investment products were mutual funds. The first ones came out in 1924. Then you had to wait all the way to 1976 before another really great investment product came out, and that was the index fund. Then you had to wait till 1993 to get another amazing investment product. And these three great investment products can all be available under one umbrella. Mutual funds, ever so briefly. Lots of information in the book that takes 3 hours to read, that's free. Mutual funds allow you to have a $50 investment managed with the same professional capabilities that professionals would give a $10 million investment. They give you the diversification of a multi-millionaire. They give you, as I mentioned, a very low minimum investment to get started or to add money to. You could add $10 a month. You could add $5 a month. Get that money working now. Get in the habit of doing it now. It is so much easier when you see how it works to step up and take on more when you get to the point that you can afford more. And these professionally managed, widely diversified, with low expenses, by the way, they are liquid in one day. So you don't have to tie your money up. And by the way, you don't have to pay a penny in commissions to buy them, and you don't have to pay a penny in commissions to sell them. That was the mutual fund. By the way, the mutual fund was not developed for the commoner, the common investor. They were developed initially for the children of very wealthy people. They were pooling money for the young people from wealthy families to give them the same professional management that they were for their parents and their grandparents. And then it grew to be this wonderful way for everybody to invest. Index funds. This didn't happen until 1976. And life is so random. The fellow who introduced the first index fund, John Bogle, actually ended up doing it because he got fired from working for another mutual fund company. And he was looking for some way to get going in the industry to, in essence, start over. And he was the one who brought the first index fund to the retail investor. And you get professional management, and you get very, very low fees. In fact, lower fees than the standard mutual funds. These index funds are more tax efficient. They have greater diversification, and according to the academics, have a higher expected return than the actively managed funds. See, the old-time mutual fund had a manager, and that manager, what they had to do was to find the best stocks, and they had to buy them at the right time and sell them at the right time. The idea was they thought they could beat the market if they would buy the right stocks and sell them and buy them at the right time. Well, it turns out that if you simply own all of the stocks in the market and you get it at a very low expense, and you don't buy and sell, one, you become more tax efficient. Two, you have lower cost of trading inside of the fund. So more money falls to the bottom line for you. And it turns out over 20 years, only about 1 out of 10 of the professionally managed, actively managed funds are able to do as well as the index. The problem is nobody knows how to pick the active manager before. So in essence, you've got 10 doors there to pick from. We can show you how you would have done with the index. If you pick an active manager, in essence, it means you have to pick one of the other 9. By the way, some of those will have terrible, terrible records. One of them will, on average, be better than the index, but only by a small amount. So it's the smart thing, the savvy thing to do, to use index funds, particularly if you don't see yourself as a big investor that wants to understand the ins and outs of trading the market. But the all-time winner, the best investment product ever invested for the majority of people, not for the people who are players who want to trade. They like the excitement of the stock market. They like to trade cryptocurrencies. They like to short the market. They like to go long the market. They like to do things that make it exciting. My whole idea of how I would like you to invest is, it is about as boring as it can possibly be. I think that boring is beautiful. Maybe not when you're telling a story, but when you're investing, truly, boring is beautiful. Target date funds do something no other fund ever did. When you put your money into a target date fund, started in 1993, and now there are a bunch of them. When you put the money in there, you tell them when you want to retire. I would guess some of you want to retire in 2065, as an example. And you will buy a target date fund that, in essence, is built for people who retire in 2065. Now, they would probably also be retiring a couple of years before, a couple of years after, but the name of the fund will be 2065, after whoever, like the Vanguard 2065 or the BlackRock 2065. And what they do, they give you all the professional management. Not all of them are this way, but you can pick a target date fund that is managed using index fund within, so they have very low expenses, huge diversification. And as you age, the people who run those mutual funds know all those 2065 people are looking to retire out here. They got 40 plus years to get there. They should be all or almost all in equities now. And as they get older, as you get closer to retirement, they're going to be adding some bonds for stability. I'm 77. I have half my money in stocks, half my money in bonds. I'm half on the gas and I'm half on the brakes. But I've only got a few years to live. You have these wonderful markets to go through that will give you some wild rides up and down. That's the way it works. You'll get used to it after you do this for a while, which is another reason you should get in there and start it soon. But here's the killer piece of information for you and the likelihood of you doing well as an individual investor and not having to worry 1 minute about what to do. You don't have to worry about when stocks are better than bonds for you, whether you should be rebalancing your portfolio somehow. None of that. It's all taken care of. Wharton did a study. They looked at 1.2 million accounts at the Vanguard family. The Vanguard family is either the biggest or the second largest mutual fund company in the industry, trillions of dollars under management. This, by the way, is the company that John Bogle founded back in 1976. And it's big because it houses index funds. They looked at 1.240 million 401k investors who were putting money in every month. Some of those people put all their money in target date funds. Some put all of their money in other funds, either because they were afraid to do anything that might be in the market, or because they thought they were smarter than those target date funds. They could pick better funds to be in at the right time. Whatever that reason that they didn't put their money in the target date fund, here is what the academic research shows: that the target date fund owners were expected to make 2.3% more per year over their life as an investor because they were in a target date fund. Now I'm looking, Jeff wants to find amino. I want to find another 0.5%. And what I see is, if you, by using a target date fund, can pick up an extra 2%, that suggests that in your investment account, you're going to be miles and miles ahead over the person or yourself if you decide to try to do it on your own. And how easy is it to invest? I'll tell you, most investing is done over the phone or over the internet, with forms that if you couldn't figure them out, the companies wouldn't survive. They have made it so easy to invest. I've given you phone numbers for 2 different companies, Fidelity and Schwab. I don't have Vanguard's name on there because they have a minimum that doesn't allow you to do what I want you to do. But Fidelity does and Schwab does, and they both have index funds, and they both have target date funds. And they don't have any minimum. And there's no commission to buy. There's no commission to sell. If you are under 18 in the state of Washington, in fact, every state but Mississippi, it's 21 there. But in almost all states, you will need a custodian to help you open up an account. Somebody who's over 18. But once you're 18, it belongs to you. And you can then start investing. Remember, no minimum. I mean it, no minimum. Test them if you don't believe me. I'll offer to put $1 in. But here's what I want you to do. I want you to put in $100. And here's the story with this $100 and why I think it's an important story. If this is the first $100 that you've invested, then this is going to give you a chance to go through the process of figuring out what mutual fund to buy. I hope you will have spent 3 hours reading my book before you do that, but you can go read an article at Fidelity or Schwab. They have articles about investing on their website. And let me tell you how it's going to be when you start to work. I predict most of you will go to work for a company that's got a 401k plan. And if you put $100 into that 401k plan, they will match it. Now, sometimes they'll match penny to penny what you put in, up to 15% of what you put in, of your salary. So if you're making $100,000, you could have put in 15, and they're going to put another free 15 in there on top of it. Now, you will not be able, I don't think, to transfer that 15 they put into a Roth, but you'll be able to put whatever you put in, your $100, and then you get a match. And I'm thinking, okay, is it possible for you to arrange a match yourself right now? You made some money this summer. You got $100. You could start. Is there anybody in your life that might consider, if you put away 100, would put away 25 or 50 or maybe even match that 100? So it would be the same thing as when you start making that investment in that 401k. I mean, we're talking about a match is bending over and picking up money off the ground. All you have to do is to save some money to do it. But I want you to understand, if you say about that $100, I am committed to keeping that $100 in equities, in a stock fund, in the S&P 500. When you read the book, you might even decide a small cap value fund would be a better place to put it for the next 90, oh, not 90, 70 years, okay? Now, here's what's going to happen. If that $100, and by the way, there's no IRA fee. They don't charge you anything to have the IRA. So your money is fully at work. No commission to get in and working all the time for you with a very small expense ratio. In fact, at Fidelity, they've got some funds that have 0 expense ratio. If you let that $100 go until you're 70, and I'm figuring you're 18 now for the sake of discussion, that $100 grows to be worth $28,000. That's the power of compounding. This is why everybody in our industry wants you to start early. The problem is most of the people who are out looking for clients are looking for $1 million accounts, not $100 accounts. I'm looking for $100 accounts because I want you to get started. And I would love to see you watch that $100. I'm sorry, that was $200 grows to $28,000. That's because you got a match of $100 plus your $100, $28,000 at age 70. Then you start taking income out. You take out 4% a year. You leave the money there working. You don't take it out of equities. You will take out over the next 30 years $114,000. And you will leave $160,000 to your heirs. This is why with my kids, in their early years when they couldn't afford it, I always matched anything they put into an IRA. Now, I got lucky because several of my kids, I only had to put in $2,000 a year because the IRA limit was $2,000. Now it's $6,000. But if this grows like this for you, I would think you'd be thinking about your kids and what you might do to try to help get them going. By the way, paul@paulmerriman.com. You got a question? I want you to email me. I want to help. Here's our website, Sound Investing. We've got over 700 articles, podcasts, videos. For those of you who are not young investors, this week we introduce a lifetime investment calculator that I think people are going to absolutely love for planning purposes. It will be out on Wednesday. And we have portfolios that we recommend, all free. So get the book and sign up for our newsletter. Make it a habit to go to paulmerriman.com from time to time to read the articles. We have other free books there, by the way, that you'll have access to. And I hope, I would love to have you write to me and tell me you did it, that you are on your way, and that you are committed to leaving that money grow for the long term. It's not easy. And rest assured, I promise you, when it's $100, you're not going to have a lot of people after you. When it's $1,000, they're still not going to be calling you constantly. When it's 100,000, the calls start to happen. They'll have better ideas. When it's 1 million, people will crawl across crushed glass to get to you, because there is an industry that is absolutely counting on you to somehow need them. You get the education. And let me assure you, from everything I know about this industry, and I've been around it for over 50 years, you can deal with the education. You put in 16,000 hours of education by the time you get out of college. You can handle another 10 to 20 hours of material to make you a savvy, educated investor. And I wish you well. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate that. So this is the point in tonight's conversation where we've got some time for Q&A. You can click on the Q&A button down on the lower portion of your menu bar, and that will allow you to type in a question, and we will see them and answer them as quickly as we can. But before we go too far into that, I just want to make sure I say thanks to Paul and to Jeff for those terrific presentations today.
And thanks to BCF, by the way. You guys have been great in helping to spread the word. I really appreciate it.
All right, so we're open and ready for questions. You can also raise your hand and we can put you in that way. I'm going to also launch our concluding poll too, which just helps to give us a little bit more information about what you thought of today's presentation, and will help us improve future presentations as well.
By the way, Jim, is it true we only have one high school student with us?
According to the poll, that's correct.
Okay. Well, what I was going to offer, because I really am excited with what Jeff is doing. And of course, he made a free offer. I mean, to give people a 30-minute consultation. In fact, I'm hoping that Jeff will talk a little bit about what's in that, because I certainly wanted to offer to personally the foundation underwrite whatever students might be here tonight, or if the folks who are here have a student that would like to take advantage of Jeff's. He's got a $25 package and a $29 package, and I would be happy if they just email me, paul@paulmerriman.com. I'll make arrangements to pay for that for them. And by the way, their name will not go on a mailing list, because I really want to get some feedback from these people who take it. And I hope that if I pay for it, they'll give me some feedback, because I'm very excited about what Jeff is doing.
Well, thank you so much, Paul. I really appreciate it. And it's so, combining your wisdom and your presentation with, I think, thinking about the future. I mean, I hope that collectively, we've given lots of food for thought for how people grow themselves and grow their lives and do well in the world. So thank you. And yes, we are happy to have a 30-minute career and college conversation with myself. I'm a certified coach, but also with my colleague Ashley, who is she's been a high school, college career counselor, and has a lot of experience doing that. And so we would sit down with a young adult, presumably, and just talk with them about how we could help them with coaching and kind of move them forward towards their goals.
So what do they get with out of curiosity, with the $25 or the $29 package? What will come out of that?
Well, that is we're going to be offering a micro learning site on Findmino beginning in September. They'll have access to some of these new courses, and then the rollout of the continuing courses over the next quarter.
So that's what I would be talking about then.
Correct.
Is that. And by the way, for the folks who are interested for their kids, I do want you to email me tonight, because we're going to put this up on the internet, and I'm not going to personally guarantee everybody who watches it that I'll pay for that, but I'll certainly do it for those of you who are kind enough to come tonight.
Excellent. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you,
Paul, I don't know if you see that question in the Q&A.
Let's see.
It says, "Hi, Paul. I encouraged my high school mentee to be here. Your work is the best, and I also gave her your book. My question is,
Terrific.
What are
No,
your
this
thoughts
is-
on Larry Swederow's alternative investment strategies?
It's okay for people who are looking for alternative investment strategies, most of which he's got a book about alternative investment strategies. I don't know if that's what the person is asking about or about the ones that he recommends. Maybe we could get a little clarification on that. Because the book on alternative investment strategies tells you don't buy them. Almost all of them. Most of them are not in your best interest. I know some that Swederow's organization does deal with, and I personally own some of those alternative investment strategies, but they are not for people who want to have their money liquid, because they are not liquid.
I'm also putting in the chat a link to a presentation to our spring series of resources where Larry actually spoke on in our financial education program this last spring. So you could watch the video of Larry's presentation and also see a couple of the blogs that Larry links to. And Paul was involved in facilitating that conversation with him.
He is one of the brightest people in our industry. His books are terrific. His latest book, anybody planning for retirement would benefit from his successful retirement book that just came out. It is just terrific. I have never had as many people thank me for that recommendation, and I'm sorry I don't remember the exact name of it, but it's having to do with a successful retirement.
Yeah, great. Another question came in. Education is expensive, making it very difficult to save and pay for college at the same time. How should I think about this?
Are you, Jeff, do you deal in that in working with people?
Not with helping them save and pay for college, no. But we can provide resources. Actually, it has a number of resources about scholarships and other programs, such as in Washington State. If you go to the first 2 years of college, like at Olympic College, there are programs in which your college can be paid for by the state while you're getting rid of those undergraduate credits, those kind of general requirements, which can be really excellent. And there are a lot of actually amazing trade opportunities that show up in these programs. So Olympic College has some great resources for that as one example. Same with Seattle Community College.
And what I would suggest to the person who submitted that is email me, paul@paulmerriman.com, and give me a little background, because it's one of those questions where the answer is it depends, and it depends on a whole bunch of things.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to spend a few minutes and give some guidance. I am no longer a professional. I never was a tax expert. I never was an estate planner. I never was a financial planner. I was a fellow who appreciated the investment process. And so now that I'm retired, I can't even give investment advice, really. I can give some general kick in the bottom advice, but that's about it.
So question for you though, Paul, I'll kind of use myself as a scenario there. So when I graduated from college, I had student loans, pretty significant student loans, probably about the value of 1 year of, tuition, room and board for that. And when I came out of college, my income in my first job was very close to, on an annual basis, was very close to the amount of debt that I had, which as you can imagine, when you start to factor in my living expenses, my home, my rentals, all of those other things, I found myself in the position of having to decide, do I prioritize, because my job at the time offered me it's a nonprofit, so it was a 403B retirement plan at the time. But the question was, do I go for that and take less money home when I know I have more debt and more expenses to pay on a, on a monthly basis? Or do I focus as much of my money as I can on getting down that debt, which of course, when I graduated, the rates were much higher than they are now, but not I guess that much higher. Or do I focus on trying to get that down and then try to be aggressive with my retirement after that?
Well, certainly when somebody has a match, we want that match reached as if it's possible, because that's such a freebie, and it compounds for the rest of your life. To the extent that you had to make payments, if the interest rates were high, you want to get rid of the high interest rate debt. It also depends on how you invest. If you're an all equity investor, as opposed to being a fixed income investor, you definitely want to focus on getting rid of that debt, I would say. But oftentimes, it sounds strange, but I know people who are saving 70% of what they make in order to invest and retire at an early age. How do they do that? They make decisions about spending that are very uncomfortable to a lot of people. And some people get a second job so they can invest for the future. Some people are just cutthroat about figuring out ways to get money to last longer. People who are part of this FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early, a lot of them are moving back in with their parents so they don't have to pay the rent. I mean, they're doing anything to put that money away. So it's partly a matter of how much sacrifice you're willing to make. Could you, in fact, have worked a second job in order to take advantage of those years? When I was in the business, I ran into a lot of folks who one spouse worked and the other one didn't, and they didn't have enough money to retire when they wanted to. And I gently suggested that the non-working spouse, could they just work enough to fund an IRA, just a little, to make that difference? As you saw in the difference between starting at birth and starting at 21 or starting at 10, the sooner we could get this money working, the better it is, and the more useful it is.
Yeah. Okay, that's helpful. Well, I want to thank you guys again for joining us today, and thanks for all of our audience for participating in today's presentation. So we're glad you found the presentation valuable. So we'll be back in touch about future presentations of this team, and want to thank you all so much and wish you best of luck, parents, as you help your young people navigate the path of retirement and navigate the path of finding their, well, I should say finding their career first, and then navigating their path of planning their financial future. So with that, thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thanks.